In today's video, we're taking a look at some offseason rumblings and rumors regarding the Maple Leafs and some potential options they might be able to acquire on the blue line. We're also looking at some updates involving goalies in the Minnesota Wild, and we're also looking at a tire fire brewing in Ottawa. Eugene Melnyk is up to his old tricks again. We'll discuss the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here, Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to cover today. Let's kick things off with the scandal brewing in the Senators organization again with Eugene Melnyk. Like I said, basically is up to his old tricks again. As we reported a couple of days ago, there was reports indicating that the Sens Foundation and the Senators hockey team were going to be splitting ways and going in different directions. The Senators put out a statement after that report came out indicating that they had let the Sens Foundation know, I believe it was 4 months ago, that they were opening up, basically bidding to have a new foundation come in, and that the Sens Foundation themselves have protested this and were, kind of up in arms over the fact that they were, had other competition coming in to replace them. They could not understand why this was happening, and ultimately it boils down to money. It always does, especially when Eugene Melnyk's involved. Essentially, there were concerns on the Senators' side that approximately 50 cents to the dollar of money that was being raised by the Sens Foundation was making its way into actual charities and into, the hands of the people who need it the most, that they were raising the money for. As we know, there's a lot of charities, including some big ones like, the Cancer Society and many other big ones that raise tons of money, but they also pay out a lot of money in advertising and executive payments and, management costs, etc. So a lot of the money that is raised doesn't always make its way to the hands of the people who they're raising the money for. And obviously Melnyk had some concerns over this, which is really kind of funny when you think about it, considering how much of a penny pincher he is and how cheap he is. 50 cents to the dollar compared to some organizations actually isn't too bad. Of course, though, there's always room to make improvements. Anthony LeBlanc, the new president and CEO of the Senators, has made a comment indicating they'd like to get that up closer to 70 to 80 cents on the dollar. And that would be great. If they want to find ways to make things more efficient, I'm sure everybody involved would be all for that. But at the end of the day, Eugene Melnyk has been cutting costs in Ottawa in several ways. There was more updates on this today. There's another news article in the Ottawa Sun discussing this current situation, as well as Melnyk's private charity that he had started a few years back called the Organ Project. I'll put a snippet from the article up on the screen and kind of read through some of the highlights. Essentially, this was noted here by the author that the Organ Project generated $991,708 of funds raised in 2018. This is, of course, a lot of this comes from the CRA reports from the Canada Revenue Agency. The Sens Foundation had made a hefty donation that year of $100,000. Of course, the bulk of the money was contributed by a major event put on by Melnyk in Toronto, where this charity organization was headquartered. But the mind-boggling part of all this is that only about $5,000 of this money was actually contributed to actual charity. About to be less than a half a cent per dollar raised, making its way into the hands of people that this was actually being raised for. So, Mr. Melnyk, where did the money go? Obviously, you're criticizing the Sens Foundation that you partnered with for 50 cents on the dollar when your own private organ project is doing way less than that. Now, let's look at the breakdown here of the actual expenses of where the money did go according to their financial reports. It shows $779,464 going to advertising and $238,118 going to management/administration costs. The one main difference here in these two organizations is that the Organ Project is a private organization and has one member running it, which is Eugene Melnyk. Shocker, I know. Whereas the Sens Foundation is run by a board and they have more people involved in making decisions, which is clearly something that you'd want to see, especially when Melnyk has his hands on it. These kind of numbers are extremely concerning, and as to prove a point here that charity can be done at a much better, more efficient case, I know a lot of Sens fans, including Sens local media and bloggers in the area, started a fundraising campaign earlier today and already surpassed $5,000 just by using social media to promote it a little bit. It really happened rather quick, came together rather fast. lots of people doing it more than anything, yes, to help the charities, but to also prove a point that it's not that hard to raise $5,000. And when you have almost $1 million in revenue and you get $5,000 of it going to actual charity, I mean, come on, Eugene, like, what are you doing? This makes absolutely no sense. And there's other reports, even from Elliot Friedman, being asked on Tim and Sid on Sportsnet, saying, is there anything the NHL can do? And his comments were that even though there have been other owners, according to his reports and his sources, other owners and other members of the league have kind of put that forth to the NHL. Is there anything you can do? Can you step in here? They don't seem to be able to do that. He said as long as he's paying the bills in Ottawa, there's not much the league itself can do. But I do know this, the people of Ottawa, the fans of the Senators, they deserve better. Melnyk goes on about the fact that he rescued the team out of bankruptcy about 20 years ago. And you know what? That's all fine and dandy, but what have you done with the team really ever since? You've run it into the ground. You've made the fan base disown you and hate you for the most part. Nobody wants to go to the games anymore. Yes, the rebuild has been tough. The product on the ice is getting a lot better, and fans are getting excited, but they don't want to support you, so they're not supporting the team, which it desperately needs. I don't think there's any danger before anybody jumps on the bandwagon of the team moving. I think the league is very much committed to that city, and I know there's other ownership groups that have been rumored numerous times to want to take over, but Mr. Stubborn Pants here, Eugene Melnyk, refuses to sell because he just does not want to give it up for whatever reason. I'd like to see another ownership group come in and buy this team and do better and get the people of Ottawa what they deserve, and that's an owner who's actually willing to spend some money to put a good product on the ice and make a whole better working environment. We've seen countless executives leave the organization, all different levels. Nobody wants anything to do with him. Nobody can work with Melnyk. They get a good guy in Anthony LeBlanc as the president and CEO that they hired recently, but how long is he going to stick around? It's only a matter of time before most other people have come to the same conclusion, and I just can't work with this ownership group, and they'll leave town. Like it's really, really concerning. I'd hope to see Gary Bettman step in and do something, but like I said, according to NHL insiders, there's really, unfortunately, not much that can be done unless they bankrupt them, and that's going to take a little while longer, unfortunately, by the looks of things. Now, as I mentioned, we also have some quick updates here on the Minnesota Wild coming from Michael Russo of The Athletic, talking about the possibilities on a couple of scenarios here. First up, the goaltending situation. Since it's been known that the NHL teams are going to be able to carry more than 2 goalies, there seems to be an agreement, at least so far, I guess we'll have to get confirmation on this, that NHL teams will be able to carry an unlimited number of goaltenders for the 2014 playoff format. That they very well could obviously have their regular goalies in Devin Dubnyk and Alex Stalock, but they likely will bring up their top AHL goaltender, who I believe was also the goalie of the year in that league, Kaapo Kähkönen, who's a really solid up-and-coming netminder and might be able to get himself not only on the roster to be around the team and get some NHL experience just from being there, but Russo feels there's even a possibility he could get some playing time, maybe even start as well, depending on how everything goes in training camp. Of course, the coach there, Dean Evanson, has made it clear that whatever goalie seems to be most ready and most prepared and put them in the best spot to win when they have their little mini training camp before the playoffs start, that's who he would go with in net, which only makes sense, of course. So we'll see. I'm not sure that Kähkönen would get the start right off the get-go. I think they'll probably give one of their veterans, probably Dubnyk, an opportunity. But with a short series, I'd say that between him and Stalock, they'd have a short leash. I'd be surprised to see the up-and-coming goalie at least get into some action if they flustered and don't do well. I know I was surprised to see some of the NHL odds about these play-in series and who's going to win, seeing that the Canucks were so low and Minnesota was so high. Personally, based on votes that we've done on this channel through our community tab, I really don't feel that's the case. I honestly think the Canucks are going to have a much better chance than all the odds makers are giving them. But either way, it'd be interesting to see how things go. And if he does get some playing time, could certainly create a bit of a goalie controversy heading into next year. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Wild make some kind of changes to get him onto the NHL roster next season, regardless. He's, I think, more than proven that he's ready and able for an opportunity. And sticking with Minnesota, there's also been some comments from Marcus Foligno indicating he's really hopeful to sign a contract extension with Minnesota, and I do think that there's a pretty good chance of that happening. He's not going to be an overly too expensive contract for them to handle. He can play with an edge, he can play physical, and certainly brings a different element than a lot of their other players, so I can personally see them working something out to keep him around, but I guess we'll see. At least there appears to be mutual interest in making it happen. Now, as I mentioned as well, we want to take a look at the Toronto Maple Leafs and some defensive options for the offseason. A recent article here by Luke Fox of Sportsnet looking at a mailbag type of article where he was asked about a couple of different defensemen, primarily Rasmus Ristolainen of the Buffalo Sabres and David Savard of the Columbus Blue Jackets, and whether or not they would make good fits that Kyle Dubas would want to make an acquisition if he felt that they were, players that could legitimately be targeted for acquisitions by the Leafs. They primarily need on the right side, as we know. They need something that's not too high in value for contract, make it fit for the salary cap. Somebody who can play on the PK and defend as well as chip in offensively, but the offensive part is not going to be the primary concern. At least it doesn't have to be. They do have some other options who can handle that. Of course, they have a very good forward group that can produce the offense too, but the blue line has to be able to move the puck at the very least to get it into the right hand so they can do what they do best, and that's score a lot of goals. And obviously Ristolainen as well as Savard could be legitimate options. It's certainly a possibility. Now, in Buffalo's case, Jason Botterill is going to have to be very careful, especially dealing with a mid-20s defenseman who's not quite lived up to his potential yet, at least on statistically speaking. To trade to a division rival like Toronto, if he were to really flourish into the defender that they thought he was going to be, I mean, that could prove costly longer term. So I would think that if he were to make that kind of trade, he'd probably want to make the Leafs overpay. So I guess we'll see. Clearly, he has the capability, what they're looking for, though. Both these defensemen we're looking at, they play 20-plus minutes. They do play in the PK, and they could certainly be able to move the puck and be the kind of defenseman that they need. Now, the other common factor here with both of these clubs is they both really need some scoring help. They both need some forward depth. And Toronto has more than enough forward depth, as we talked about before. They have all kinds of forwards, many of which who can contribute offensively. So it only makes sense that they would make good trading partners from that perspective, at least. Now, there's going to be lots of speculation about what the Leafs are going to do. There's plenty of other teams. We're going to have such a long stretch here before we really see free agency or any significant trades. There's bound to be lots of talk, lots of speculation, and until we actually get some results on what a lot of teams are going to do, including this situation here in Toronto. But we have guys like Kasperi Kapanen, who might be a prime candidate for either of those teams, maybe an Alex Kerfoot. Andreas Johnsson's out for an extended period of time with a knee injury. That might kind of scare teams off, even though he would be healthy for next season. They might want to see how he rehabs and get him some game action before they'd be willing to make that as an acquisition. Hard to say, but there's lots of other interesting options too. And in Toronto's case, where they're not going to have a guy like Johnsson in the lineup, that's going to create more of an opportunity for Mikheyev to come back and play. Youngster Nick Robertson could get in the lineup as well, see if he can prove himself, and that might make somebody else more expendable too by the time we actually hit the offseason. This playoff format that's going to be played through here could be an opportunity to open some eyes in Toronto and to kind of determine who might be more likely to be traded amongst all this deep group of forwards that they have working with and are currently under contract. I think a trade for David Savard would probably be more likely than Ristolainen, just the fact that they're not in the same division. But like I said, with Toronto, we've seen them trade with division rivals before. That doesn't necessarily scare off Kyle Dubas, just a matter of getting that right deal in place. And in Columbus's case, obviously, they're going to be looking to add some forward depth. And it doesn't mean that they're looking to trade David Savard. We don't really have any set rumors that there's any reason to think he's on the trade block. It's just a player that was proposed in this mailbag article. And Luke Fox agrees, and I do as well, that he certainly would be a great fit and kind of falls into the category of what Kyle Dubas is looking to acquire, and that the Maple Leafs would have what they're looking for to improve their team. So from a lot of levels, it makes a lot of sense. But it doesn't mean that he would be the player that Dubas is targeting, and it doesn't mean that the Jackets would certainly want to move him. Same with Ristolainen in Buffalo. I'm certainly still about 50-50 on whether or not Ristolainen's moved. I think it could be Brandon Montour. It might make more sense, and I still think Montour might be a good fit for the Leafs too. But in some ways, Savard or Ristolainen might make more sense just from the defensive capabilities in his own end and able to play PK, etc. A little bit more versatile, I guess. But, Montour's not a terrible option either. And he's certainly, where he's a restricted free agent, he's still somewhat of a controllable asset to get him under contract for the next few years to kind of help them manage their cap situation. So let me know what you think based on this mailbag article. Do you agree that Ristolainen or Savard would be good options for the Leafs on the blue line? If so, what do you think would be a good mock trade? So leave me your comments on that. We can discuss further. And if they're not the right players you feel the Leafs should be targeting, who else on the blue line makes sense? Give me your mock trades on those two as well, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.